Hi, welcome to Diamond Delight Edibles. My name is Liz. If this is the first time you're stopping by, and the rest of you guys, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining. So today I am going to show you how to make real fruit gummies. Yes, made with real fruit. So you can use frozen or not frozen, fresh fruit, that would be the word. Fresh or frozen. I prefer the frozen. However, like I said, you can use either, and you can make these yummy Cannabutter fruit snacks. Now, your kids would love these too, minus the Cannabutter, obviously. But if you want to make a really nice candy for your kids, just follow the recipe along. Just exclude the Cannabutter and the gum, and you've got a great, relatively somewhat, okay, you're sticking fruit in it, so we can call it somewhat healthy candy for your kids. All right, guys, so let's jump right into those ingredients, what we need to get started, and yeah, we'll get these made. Oh, one thing I wanted to tell you, if you are, because we're using real fruit, you do need to use a mold inhibitor. Lorraine's makes one, so it's called Lorraine's mold inhibitor. I, however, do not have it. If you do not use a mold inhibitor, you will need to keep these in the refrigerator. You won't be able to keep them out for like 2-3 weeks on the counter because they will get moldy. If you do use the mold inhibitor, however, you will. But I do not have it, so I'm not using it, but I just wanted to let you know that piece of information. So with mold inhibitor, you can keep them out and they'll have a much longer shelf life. Without it, you're going to want to keep them refrigerated and get them eaten fairly quickly. All right, so for our gummy fruit snacks, what we're going to need is about 2 cups of fruit. So I use frozen fruit. I just find it's way easier to use, so you can use any favorite fruit that you like. I'm using a mixed berry combo, so it's blueberries, strawberry, and blackberries. The only fruit that you cannot use is pineapple, and I think also mango, because they contain an enzyme that will not allow gelatin to set. But other than that, you're free to go. So as I said, you can use fresh fruit or frozen fruit. And I said you're going to want about 2 cups. We're only going to use about 1 cup. The extra you can always freeze and save for later. Then for our candy syrup, you're going to need 3/4 cup of light corn syrup, a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, and 1/4 cup of water. Now, if you have a can of syrup or a can of sugar, you can absolutely use those as well. So again, you'd want to split part of it, so 1/4 cup, however you want to split that up. You can absolutely use those, but today I'm just demonstrating with Cannabutter. Now, for the rest of it, what you're going to need is a 1/4 cup of melted Cannabutter, a 1/4 cup of sugar, granulated sugar, another 1/4 cup of granulated sugar that we need to pre-mix our Clear Jel with. You're going to need instant Clear Jel. Now, you don't have to use this. If you don't have this, you can eliminate it. But what this adds to is makes that candy a little softer instead of being so gelatin-like. It makes it that softer, that real candy texture of the fruit snacks. So this is an optional if you've got it. If not, you don't need to. If you you are not using the Clear Jel, eliminate 1/4 cup of the sugar. You're going to need 3/4 cup of ice cold water for blooming your gelatin. You're going to need 3.5 tablespoons of unflavored gelatin. So it was 3.5 tablespoons unflavored gelatin. And 1/2 teaspoon of citric acid. 1/2 teaspoon of gum. Now this is our emulsifier. This is what's going to allow us to combine our butter with our water, because that's a water oil mixture, and you need an emulsifier in order to combine those two to become one, so that they become friends instead of mortal enemies. And that is it, I believe. So for this, we don't need any extra color or flavoring. That's what's really nice. And now another side note, for those of you who do not like corn syrup, you can make a substitute called inverted sugar, which is 2 cups of granulated sugar, 1 cup of water, boil it to 234 degrees. As soon as it hits that temperature, remove it from the heat, put the lid on the pot. Do not touch it again until it hits room temperature. Once you're at room temperature, it's stable, good to go. If you want more details about how to do that, check out my can of syrup video. It's making inverted sugar, but with can of syrup. Just avoid the can of sugar part. That's all. Okay, so that's all we need for our ingredients. Let's jump into our equipment that we need, and we'll get going. All right, so for the equipment, we are going to need 2 small saucepans, a whisk, spatula, oops, the hand blender. This is for emulsifying. If you don't have one, you can use the whisk. It'll work, you just have to whisk really, really hard. But these are definitely an investment if you are going to be regularly making candy and things like that. You're going to need a candy thermometer. Now check this out. I got this off Amazon. It's a dual. So it's got the probe. It's got that probe, and then it's got a probe that you stick in the side, which is awesome. So I can just slide it in my pot and keep it on the side. Oh, that's great, because remember the issues I always had before? Problem solved. And you're going to need your distributing bottles. These are Sweet Sugar Bell, I believe. Yeah, Sweet Sugar Bell. I got links for all these equipment if you want. Just to make life easy, you can check out what it is in the description there. And then just a cup of hot water with a pastry brush for washing down the side of our pot. That's pretty much what we need. I'm sure I'm going to throw some extras in there. Oh, obviously your molds. Now, a trick that I've learned with my molds is, because this is going to be a looser syrup, and I'm going to do 2 colors as always, put your molds into the freezer. That way when you put, as soon as you squeeze it in, it kind of immediately starts to solidify. That way your colors don't bleed all together. So it's a really cool little trick for you. All right, so let's get all those ingredients put together and let's make some fruit snacks. So the first thing we want to do is get our gelatin bloomed, and it'll be set aside and waiting for us. So we're going to add our 3/4 of a cup of ice cold water and 3½ tablespoons of our unflavored gelatin. And you just want to sprinkle it kind of evenly over the top, or it'll be 4 envelopes of the gelatin approximately. And then you want to just mix that in until it is well mixed and there's no lumps. And then while you're mixing this, how you can kind of tell that your gelatin, because sometimes your gelatin may not be thickening as well, is while you're mixing it, it should start to feel like applesauce, the texture of applesauce. Now I'm feeling this is a little bit thin. It's all dissolved and it's still not quite as thick as I'd like it. So I'm going to add about another ½ tablespoon to that. That's better. So that when you mix it up and it's all dissolved, that's the texture you want it to be. So like an applesauce. And then I'm just going to set that aside. We'll let that bloom. And we need at least a minimum of 5 minutes, but it's okay, it can wait longer. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare our berries, or our fruit, whatever fruit that you're using. So we are going to put our heat on to medium-high. Okay, so the first step is our berries. Now what you're going to need to do is to prepare your berries ahead of time, and you're going to need to macerate them. And what that means is whether you're using frozen or fresh, put them into a bowl. It's at about 2 cups. You're going to add a 1/4 cup of lemon juice and 2 tablespoons of sugar. Mix that all around. Cover it with saran wrap and put it into the fridge for a minimum of 2 hours. If you are using frozen fruit, it's going to be about 4 hours. Or you can just leave it out on the counter. That's no problem. And you want to, it will create this really nice syrup, and everything will be defrosted. Dissolved, whatever, defrosted. Not frozen anymore. You need to do that ahead of time. So the first thing I want to do, because I've got a lot of seeds and extra stuff, I'm just going to strain off the extra juice and those seeds. Now, what you can actually use that juice for, don't waste it, is if you're a baker, you can make a simple syrup with it. So add about ½ cup of water, a cup of sugar, boil it for 2 to 3 minutes, and that's it. Let her be, and you've got a simple syrup that you can then use on your cakes, to coat your cakes with. You know, those the American bakers and all that stuff, how they're always putting those things on. You too can do the same. So I'm just getting a lot of that excess juice here. Well, obviously I'm not going to get the seeds out. I'll get those out after when we mush it down. When we purify it. So I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of sugar to that. Get my spatula. And we're going to turn our heat on to medium high. And you're just going to mix that around. We're just going to bring this to a boil for about 2 minutes. So my berries are coming to a boil here. Can you see that? Sort of. Gotta get better angles. So you're just going to continue mixing that. Like I said, we're just going to boil that for about 2 minutes. And then we want to get our hand blender ready. Alright, so my little berries have been boiling here for a couple of minutes. This is just to soften them up so that we can purify them. Puree them, not purify, puree them a lot easier. And if you're using fresh fruit, you may need to go for about 5 minutes. And now you're going to get your hand blender. Be very careful because it's going to be hot, and be careful if anything splashes up. So we are going to puree this. Okay, so you're going to continue to blend that until it is completely purified. All your fruit is completely blended and there's no major chunks. And I'm just going to strain our puree to catch all the seeds and any fruit chunks that did not get liquefied. Pureed. And then you're just going to work your puree through your strainer. Takes a little while. Just scrape off the bottom. This is a bit of a pain, but it's necessary to catch, like I said, if you're definitely using berries or fruits with seeds, and also to make sure, like I said, any fruit that doesn't get purified, you don't want any chunks in your candies. So just continue that until you can't get anything, nothing else is working its way through the mesh. And you're just going to have kind of a pulpy mush left. Okay, and then once you've got all that, we want to measure out about we're going to measure out a cup of our fruit puree. Well, that worked out pretty even. All right. Okay, so now, I'm going to clean this off quickly. Okay, so rinse off your blender because you're going to need it again. And we are going to take our fruit puree, put her back in the pot. And we are going to add a ½ teaspoon of citric acid. Citric acid helps two things, to help to bring out the fruit flavors, the tartness in the fruit flavors, as well as it helps prevent crystallization. Okay, just mix that in. And now we are going to pre-mix up here our clear gel. So we're taking a ¼ cup of granulated sugar, and we're going to take 1 tablespoon of our clear gel. And it needs to be the instant clear gel. You have to cook it for 5 minutes. Boil it at a vigorous boil for 5 minutes. And we can't really do that with our fruit. So you would definitely want to use the instant if you are using it. Thoroughly mix that together. We're going to set that, we'll just leave that there for a moment. So now we are going to add our Cannabutter to our puree, to our fruit puree. Blah. Say that 10 times quick. So first, drop in your melted Cannabutter. Want to make sure to get her all. And sprinkle in a half a teaspoon of gum. And you want to try and get that kind of mixed all around. Not mixed, like sprinkled kind of evenly around. Like so. Can't really see there. That doesn't help, sorry. And I'm going to actually angle the camera because I want you to see the emulsification. Okay, so we're just going to kind of just stir that in a little bit to begin with. Make sure it's not stuck to the sides. Then we are going to get our hand blender. Now, this can happen sometimes because I let that grower sit for a minute or two while I was setting stuff up. It started to clump. If that does that, you end up with any lumps in your mixture, don't worry about it. Just run it through a strainer and it will catch those lumps and all is good. Which I am going to have to do here, so watch. Doesn't always happen. If you actually mix your gum into a little bit of your butter first, it will melt and you won't ever have that issue. I kind of forgot that step. Okay. Now, if you're using the Clear Jel, you need to do this last step. If you're not using Clear Jel, just set your puree aside. And we'll be moving on to our candy syrup. So you're going to put your puree back into the pot on medium-low heat. Actually, you can turn it up to medium. We just need to get it heated up and get it started boiling. Now, see what an emulsifier does? You can see that there's no oil separation between your water and your oil. As I said, it makes them friends. And yes, you can use soy or sunflower lecithin. You would use about a teaspoon of that. I'm just going to get my whisk handy. Once our mixture comes to a boil here, turn off your heat, take it off the heat. And we are going to whisk in our sugar and Clear Jel mixture. So I just do a little bit at first, get that whisk in. And let's get the rest of it in. And see how this thickens it up? So as I said, what this creates is a softer texture to your candy versus it being more of that gelatin. Okay, so we are going to we're going to set this off to our side, and now we're going to cook up our candy syrup. All right, so to our pot, we are going to add our half a cup of sugar, 3/4 of a cup of corn syrup, and our 1/4 cup of water. You can just stir that together and turn your heat on to medium-high. So you're going to stir this until it comes to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, we'll add our candy thermometer and cook it to 275 degrees. And this is when you're going to want your cup of hot water and that pastry brush to clean down the sides of your pot. Okay, so my syrup's beginning to boil. So at this point, I'm going to stop stirring. And we are going to cook this to 275 degrees. Now, for those who cook syrup for the first time, your temperature will come up to around the 220, 223 mark, and it's going to sit there for a few minutes. This is when your large majority of your water is starting to boil off. So it is not uncommon for it to sit at that temperature for a while. Then once it does start passing that, the temperature will start to increase fairly quickly. So I've had a few people comment saying, well, it doesn't get higher than 220. You just got to be patient. It will. And again, just wash down any sugar crystals that may form on the side. All right, so we're getting there. We're almost at temperature. All right, so the candy's at temp. I'm going to remove it. Just put it on the stone here. That'll help take away the heat quickly. So I'm just waiting for the bubbling to stop. And we're going to add in our fruit puree. All right, so our bubbling is stopped or is starting to subside there. Let's go into a syrup. Now, when you do add the puree, it is going to bubble up again. Don't worry about that. Okay, it may bubble up again. Yeah. And we are going to mix this, stir it until everything is completely mixed together. And we're going to stir this for a couple of minutes until our fruit and our syrup and everything gets combined and that extra sugar gets melted. Now, if you find that the syrup is starting to solidify on the bottom, no problem. Just put your heat on to low and we'll get that melted. And you just want to heat it up until the candy syrup is melted and it becomes syrup again. We don't want to start it boiling. And I'm going to use the hand blender on that so that we can get everything emulsified, because we do have the oil. We've just added in some more water to that. We're going to use the hand blender to get that all emulsified. Now have a look. If you can see any butter rising at the top, so you'll see like a little bit of an oil slick. I'm going to add in a little bit more gum to get that emulsified, because what will happen is that will rise to the top of your candies and you won't have a nice mixture. Okay, so what I'm going to do this time is I'm adding a little bit of oil and I'm adding about a 1/4 teaspoon of the gum to it. Just mix it together and see how it dissolves. This will avoid any lumping. And now we're just going to add that on into our candy. And get our handy dandy blender. And now our last step is we are going to add in our gelatin. So we've got our bloom gelatin. This will be warm enough for it to melt. We don't want to have it on heat because gelatin will break very easily if it is too high. It melts at a warm water bath temperature. So you're just going to break that up into smaller chunks and you're just going to stir that until it is all melted. And I'm just going to give it one final mix here with our hand mix blender. And there we go. Now I'm just going to let this sit for a little bit so that so the air bubbles and that can work out and we can have a clearer syrup mixture. So instead of having it like this, it'll become clearer. So we're just going to let it sit probably about 15-20 minutes or so. And if it does stiffen up too much, you can just turn it on low heat to remelt it. And then when the air bubbles rise up to the top, settle at the top here, you can just use this little small strainer just to scoop them off. Or you can also stir gently, kind of break them, but they're a little hard. Then as it cools, if you did help remove some more of those air bubbles, is just go in a circular motion, gentle circular motion, and see how it'll pull those bubbles kind of all together in the middle. Then you can just take your scoop and just skim it off the top. Now I'm going to get my bottles, fill up my large one, and I use the strainer to help catch anything else or any extra seeds that may have snuck through. Or if it's become a little too solidified, you can just put it up back on the heat, low heat for just a couple of minutes just to warm it up a little bit. Now half of this I'm going to do is the translucent, and the other half I'm going to add a couple of drops of white to create a solid background, but with the same kind of color. So it looks really cool. Gives you a nice contrast. I'm just going to give this a real quick heat up here. So I just heated it up just a little bit. You don't want to heat it too much because you'll break the gelatin. So just enough to make it a little bit more syrupy. I love my technical terms. So I'm just going to add a couple of drops of the white food coloring. And mix that in. And so see how it creates that solid background? Ah! Alright, so I just took my molds out of the freezer. All nice and cold and chilled. And I'm going to get my two colors, my solid and my clear, and just pour, just both together. And you can kind of do any design you want. We'll get that in a minute. Or just go half and half, or a little marble effect. And that's it. Just fill up your cavities. And then you're going to pop these into the fridge for about 2 hours. And then we'll come back and take them out. And you can see what they look like. All right, so it's time to pop these puppies out. So let's have a look-see. There we go. See how nicely and easy they pop out. Now these guys do not get sugar or sour coated. These are just the plain kind. They're regular fruit snacks with a little kick. So I'm just gonna get the rest of these guys out. Here you go, have a look up close. Let's check that out. Yeah, I got the two-tone, solid with the translucent. They look pretty cool, eh? Let's check out a dinosaur. There we go. Ooh, check that one out. Woo-hoo-hoo. Alright, so I'm just going to pop the rest of these guys out. And, yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this. Oh, sorry. So what you're going to do is, if you have used the mold inhibitor, you can let these dry out on the counter for a couple of days. If you have not used the mold inhibitor, you're going to put them into the fridge for about 48 hours to dry in the fridge, then take them out for 24 hours. But for pretty much, you'll want to keep them in the fridge in a sealed airtight container. I would not keep these out exposed if you haven't used the inhibitor for more than 3 or 4 days. Yeah, because you don't want anybody getting sick, and because you're using the real fruit, they will likely get mold on them very quickly. Alright, so that's everything. If you have any questions at all or any comments that you'd like to leave, please don't hesitate. And thank you guys so much for watching. You have an awesome rest of your day.